Hello, welcome to another How to Code Well video tutorial. My name's Peter Fisher. Obviously this isn't going to be a typical tutorial like a PHP a video screencast or MySQL or Docker or whatever. Today I'm going to have a little rant. Today I'm going to talk about the misconception that some people have about what makes up a good web developer, what defines a good web developer, because I feel that there are some maybe in the web development community as well as in the recruitment side of things that have a few misconceptions as to what makes up a good web developer. Now you're quite rightly going to sit there and go, well, what experiences does he have to justify these opinions, these controversial opinions? So I would like to spend a couple of minutes just going through my background, and then give you a foundation to go, okay, well, maybe he isn't talking out of his behind, and maybe he does know what he's talking about, hopefully. So, as you know, my name's Peter Fisher. I'm a freelance web and mobile developer. My company is Websomatic, and going all the way back to the first time I actually wrote some code, that was probably at school. I fell in love with the fact that you could produce quickly HTML and get a quick feedback from the browser by writing some code, then pressing refresh on the browser. You could see instantly something being created. Now I fell in love with that. That was an instant appeal. And then after school, I did 2 years. I did 2 courses in IT, in IT systems. Both courses were 2 years each, so 4 years. And I learned everything in IT, or I shouldn't say everything in IT. I learned most of the topics of IT. Okay, so anything from word processing to accounting to animation, all sorts of stuff, but it was very low level stuff, right? And in there I learnt VB6, I learnt databases and normalization, UML, feasibility studies, how to interview techies and non-techies and work out what a system does. And I came away from those 2 courses thinking, okay, well, I want to do something programmy and graphic-y, but I still don't know what. So I chose to do an e-commerce and multimedia university degree at the University of Gloucestershire. And so I refined my knowledge base of IT systems to those domains. So I took with me the love of the web, getting the instant feedback and the feeling of achievement. Although most of the time it was the feeling of, oh dear, this certainly doesn't look how I wanted it to look, or there's a bug here, let's try and fix it, and so forth. So I took that with me, and we did Java, we did XML, we also did 3D animation, Flash and ActionScript, and Photoshop and stuff like that. So after that degree, I then I had to take my graduation off as annual leave, because straight after graduation I got a job at a digital agency in Wiltshire, and I did that for 4.5 years. So you can see that this time period is starting to scale, and so we did e-commerce sites, we did shopping carts, we did brochure sites, we did booking systems, we did content management systems, we used our own framework, we used other people's frameworks, we used Symfony, we used Cake PHP. I was put on courses to learn more about object-oriented programming in PHP. It was at that point where I fell in love with Linux, and I started learning Linux more, and how to deploy sites and so forth. And that was a real learning curve for me, because you came away from your academic life, where you didn't necessarily drop out if you got a bad review from your lecturer. It was as long as you showed your workings, it was fine, right? So as long as you showed the code, as long as you could show your understanding of the code, it doesn't really matter if you didn't meet the overall criteria. Now, you just got a grade less, perhaps, right? That mentality does not work when you're working in the real world, and you have a project that has to be done to spec at a certain time. Okay, that is when you start having no-go live meetings where people are actually deciding whether or not to push the button. You don't have that with your degree. You don't have a boardroom meeting and say, with your lecturer, and say, this project doesn't fit every single criteria. In fact, there's actually bugs in this project, but I'll still hand it to you. You can't do that to your client. So yeah, I was there for 4.5 years, and that's a really good team of people, really good to cut my teeth on. And then after that, I did a 2.5-year stint at a web hosting company in Gloucestershire, and that was really good. That I again worked with some really intelligent programmers, really good programmers, really good project managers, really good graphics designers, and again, very intensive stuff. So intensive deadlines. You learn how to manage people as a developer, manage the expectations of the project manager, and build a rapport with the client, which would be the PM at that time, and also learning new technologies. So it's not just PHP. It was Python. It was different. Hosting websites, you're hosting all sorts of things, right? Whole spectrum. And then not only that, but also the external services that you offer, hardware and so forth. So anyway, that was 2.5 years, and then after that, so also in there, I did an ethical hacking course on that, which was pretty cool. I came away feeling that I wanted to live in a cave and turn all my devices off. But anyway, I digress. So after that, I also did a 4.5-year or 4 and a bit year stint for a company in Bristol, and that was a different type of thing, because that was a remote work. So for 4.5 years, I was working in this office. Obviously, we went in and met and had meetings and so forth, but for the most part, for the majority of the time, we were working in our own environments, normally at home, and or in our own offices, and so you had that new level of ownership that you had to have with what you were doing. If you can't go and say you can't meet someone in a month and from 1 month and say, this is going to be done fine and to standard in the following month, and then go and see them in that month and then say, oh, sorry, no, that doesn't work. It's going to take you another month. That can't happen. And also the size of that company was there was nowhere to hide. Okay, so it very quickly, I had a sense of ownership of the projects, and to give you more information on the projects, it was So it was content managed solutions, maybe I should say. It was like managing data. Okay, and I know that sounds really wishy-washy, but we were also using mobile phones as a way of transmitting that data to through an API to the website, and that allowed me to learn Accelerator, which is what I use to build mobile applications with, because Accelerator is JavaScript and you can compile JavaScript down to iOS or Android or whatever. And so I also have a little bit of knowledge of Xcode and Android that came along with that. So we built a couple of apps, and that was really good. And like I said, I was there for about 4 and a bit years. And then after that, I decided to go alone, and I'm a freelancer now. I do mobile websites and I do e-commerce websites and brochure sites and a whole array of sites, booking sites and so forth, as well as mobile applications, which are primarily in Accelerator. So that's me. That's the boring bit done. Now, hopefully you can see that I can speak with maybe a level of I don't want to say authority, but just some sort of experience. I don't want to come across arrogant or anything, but the experiences that I've had have allowed me to have this rant, let's just say. So this might be a bit controversial, but the way I see it is that having a certification of a framework or a language does not mean that you are a good web developer. It means that you are good at that framework or that language. It doesn't mean that you are a good web developer. Now, to justify that, I need to talk about what is a web developer. And a web developer is this big, you can see it as like a big bubble, right? And in that bubble there are certain elements, and one of those elements is being the programmer. So that's the thing that you're going to develop. That's the output. But a web developer is so much more than just the programming side of things. And I guess this throughout my career, this has become more evident to me, based on the scale of the projects and the teams that I've been working with, in terms of sheer amounts of people, as well as sheer amounts of spec and so forth. Because I know some really good certified developers, and they're exceptional when it comes to the things that they're certified in, because they have to be, because they're certified. To be certified in Zend or Symfony, for example, it takes a lot of time, and a lot of money. But then you could just read the documentation, and as long as you have a good understanding, you could be, you could get on with it, fine. And the good certified developers I know are not blinkered. Okay, and what I mean by that is that they know other languages, they know other technologies and other frameworks. They know the pitfalls of their framework of choice. Okay, when you're building a website, you're not just using one language. Okay, you're not just using one technology, because a website is so much more than that. So you need to have a fairly good understanding of the database, or how the data is structured. It doesn't have to be a database. It could be DynamoDB for all that cares. But you need to have a relatively good understanding of that, and also the front end as well. Now, obviously that changes, because you could have it depending on the scale of the company, because you could have graphics designers that deal with the front end. You could have JavaScript developers that deal with the front end, backend developers that deal with the front end. But if, for example, you're a backend developer and all you're doing is working on the PHP, you still need to know how the data is going to hang together in the back in the data store in the cloud, or wherever it is. You need to have a good understanding of that. You also need to have a good understanding of the performance issues that can arise with retrieving or sending that data up to wherever it's being stored. You also need to have a good understanding with the UI, with the UX, with how that information is going to be presented to the user, and how the user is going to interact with that. So how that user is going to use perhaps Ajax as a means of sending up requests. Now, if you've got a front-end developer and you've got a back-end developer, and all they know is their own fields, they don't know anything else, right? There's no transference of skills there. Then you'll find that you've got a JavaScript developer who wants to fetch the data in such a way that the back-end developer will go, no, because that's going to cause performance issues. So there needs to be some collaboration, okay? You can't just box yourselves in, and you can't just go, well, no, all I know is Symfony or Cake PHP. I'm not going to worry about how it's going to look, or I'm not going to worry about how the data is going to be stored. So you need to have an understanding of the technology that's used. You also need to have an understanding of the other technology that is available. So, for example, very rarely do I use one framework or one technology to do something. Like, for example, importing scripts, importers and exporters, or deployment scripts, right? Why would you write a deployment script in PHP? You can do it. There are ways to manipulate FTP through deployment scripts, but then if you're using FTP to deploy your website, then you're a fool, in my opinion. So you would use Bash, you would use something like Capistrano, which is Ruby. So you need to have a level of Ruby, or obviously you don't need Ruby to deploy your stuff. You could do it in other languages, but still it's other languages, right? So you need to know what is available, and your framework that you are using might not be using the latest technology. It might not be using the latest good practices. And so what I'm saying is you don't necessarily need to have the same level of understanding in other languages that you do in say PHP, but you need to have enough, right? You need to have enough to say, well, I can do it better in that language. Take, for example, moving images, right, from one server to the other. So you could use rsync, or Bash, or you could put that in an SNS queue in AWS. You could loads of things, right? It doesn't have to be just PHP or whatever you're trained in, okay? And also on the flip side to that is that you become aware of the other way, the other shade of grass on the other lawn. You start to see from a retrospective point of view that the language that you're using has some really weird nuances, and PHP is well known for that. Not so much in PHP 7, but certainly in the older versions where the arrays, the function calls were, the parameters were in a very odd order. And then you use something like Ruby and it's a breath of fresh air, in some cases. Or you use Python and you notice that, well, there's no curly braces, what's going on here? And you take a step back and you go, well, actually, this is making code a little bit more readable. So you start to appreciate other things, and you start to be aware of the certain issues. You become a well-rounded developer, okay? And that, I suppose that's the key, right? To become a good web developer, you need to be more of a well-rounded thing. So there's so yeah, okay. So there's a technology aspect to this. There's also a human aspect to this. So moving away from the programming side, which is all that your certificate is going to give you. Okay, so you need to be confident in yourself. A good web developer needs to know their own skill level. They need to be confident that that the time that they estimate is the time that they're going to use to develop. Okay, and they need to be aware of their own faults, and they need to be aware of their own limitations in skill. Okay, and they need to be comfortable to put their hands up and say, I don't actually know how to do this. Can you either show me how to do this or point me in the right direction? So many times where, and this is something that I learned very early on, is that if you become blinkered and you become panicky and you become worried and you sit in a corner and you try and do the same thing for like hours and hours and hours, and it's not working, and you're sat in a room full of people who know how to get that working, then who's the fool? You are, right? Because you're not using everybody else's skill set sufficiently. So I found that quite a bit when I was learning MySQL. From moving from the academic side to the real world working side, you quickly discovered that you were taken down a couple of pegs. You weren't as good as what you thought you were. Yes, you've got a degree, but that doesn't really mean much on the first day. And the other team, the other members of your development team, are there to be to share their experiences and their knowledge, and as a good web developer needs to then be able to absorb that. Okay, take that on. It's a real pain to ask someone the same thing 6 times, right? So if you don't understand something, then it needs to be taught to you in a different way. So that's the second thing. So being comfortable with what you know and what you don't know, and being comfortable talking to other people, other developers about that. Another thing is to be reliable. Okay, so that is again understanding how quickly you can do something, and then doing that within the agreed time frame. Otherwise, people will go, well, you've quoted this amount of time, I'm going to double it. because every time you quote, it's always more. And that's a bad thing, because you get a bad rep, right? It's all about reputation. Well, it's not all about reputation, but reputation is a good thing to start to build up. Having a good reputation. Having a bad reputation is bad. Don't do that. So that's the third thing. Okay, so being reliable, consistent as well. So you need to be able to consistently hit deadlines and hit targets. But you need to be aware when you're, because that's not always going to happen, right? There's always going to be issues. There's definitely going to be times where things have gone over budget and perhaps over time and stuff. But you need to be honest. So honesty is another thing. And you need to admit to the client or the development team or the PM or or to yourself that it's actually taking you longer than you expected, and you know, it's not a bad thing to do that, and to take a step back and say, well, actually, you know, I thought this was going to take me an hour, it's actually taken me 2 hours. So, you know, what's gone wrong there? And then you filter that back into your learning experience. So the next time you can predict that that might happen, right? So that's the next thing, is being honest. Talking now about the employment side, so the recruitment side. When someone says to you, I'm certified in XYZ of a framework, do not take that as, well, he's certified to the latest standard. Because if I was looking at, if I was a recruitment agent and I was looking at a whole raft of CVs, and if one of them said they were certified in, say, Symfony, but they didn't say the version of Symfony, then that would red flag. That would make a red flag for me, because I would want to quiz that. I would want to ask, well, what version is that exactly? Because there's no point in being certified on a version that is legacy, and a lot of the time, the non-techies, the recruitment agents, the people who make the big decisions, right? They just think, well, you're certified in something, so that's a good thing. Yes, it is a good thing, but it's only good if that is actually being used. So, if anyone's tried migrating Symfony 1 to Symfony 2, you know that well, you just don't. You rebuild. Because it's so different. It's the same with Zen 1 and Zen 2 and Zen 3. You know, it's there's so many BC breaks, which is backwards compatibility breaks, that you have to, from a business standpoint, you have to take the hard line of saying, well, in actual fact, in order to have all these new shiny toys and have all these security patches and so forth, we must look at redeveloping this site in another version of this framework. So, being certified being certified for a framework which is a legacy version is not a good thing. So, if you're in an interview, bring a techie in, and put a line under the words certification of Symfony or something, Zen or whatever, and ask, well, what version is that? Does that marry up with the version that you're using or want to use? Because if it doesn't, then it's, yeah, you might have issues. You probably will have issues. I mean, if he turns around and says, or if she turns around and says, well, yeah, it's a legacy certification, but I'm actually working towards the certification of the next version, then yeah, that's all well good. So that's the other thing. And finally, it's business knowledge. And that might sound really weird. Why does a web developer need business knowledge? But they need to have the knowledge of what the business requires in a sort of a technical way, I guess. So they need to understand the project requirement document. They need to understand the future roadmap. They need to understand what the business needs are. Okay, and the business needs could be anything from, I don't know, an e-com site that is performs, that every page on that e-com site performs to this in this timescale, right? Performs this well. So there's no point in building something that is going to be sloppy in the future. So you need to know that, and you need to have an understanding that the business is going to be losing money if this project doesn't go live when you say it can go live. When you say your development is going to finish, or when you agree that your development is going to finish, because forever, you are an asset to that company, or to that business. They are paying you to develop their system. Okay, any time that is spent developing their system after you've agreed that the system will go live is negative in their view. Okay, so the whole concept of just enough, right? So you just have to build enough that meets the standard and the specification. So don't go and reinvent the wheel. Don't go and reinvent WordPress. Don't go and build revisioning systems or blogs or all of that stuff. There is technology out there that you can use quickly and rapidly to do a lot of stuff, especially with the new push with things like dependency injection with Composer. There are components that you can pull down that do a lot of stuff for you that you just need to configure. Now you need to be aware of that. So don't go and hide in a room and speak to nobody for months and months and months, or weeks and weeks and weeks, developing something that has already been developed. And you could argue, right, you could say, well, I don't want to be using WordPress, or I don't want to be using Drupal or whatever, because that means that we're now reliant on their patches and their updates and so forth, which, yes, is a good argument to make, but you need to have that argument. You need to have that argument with the people who are deciding the budget, right? Because the counter argument of that is well, there are more of them than there are of us, so if there is a bug, then they'll fix it quickly. And you might not be around next month, so the code that you write that will need to be, which possibly need to be patched if we found a security flaw in it, you're not going to be around. So, but that discussion needs to happen. Okay. So that's the final thing. Having an idea of what the business needs to do, and rapidly doing it. Okay, so that's my rant over. I hope you're still here. If you're not, then I shan't do this ever again. But I will speak to you all soon, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.